Welcome to the Office Latte podcast, where we go beyond the boardroom to explore new conversations on life and career. I'm Erin Kennedy, CEO of Professional Resume Services and wife, mother, sister, daughter, aunt, and friend. Now, let's dive in. Well, good morning, Summer. How are you?
Good morning. I am doing well. How are you doing?
Good. On the last leg of summer. So I have to say, I'm kind of looking forward to it. It's been feeling so fallish lately here. I mean, it was so cold the last few days. I'm just kind of looking forward to pumpkins, I'll be honest. But anyways, you have huge news.
Yes, I am moving. Well, first of all, I want to say I'm gonna miss fall because where I'm moving won't have the falls we have in Michigan. I'm moving to San Diego in about two
Cannot
weeks.
believe it.
When
It's
this
so far
episode,
away from me.
I know, I literally, when this episode drops, I'm gonna be hopefully living in San Diego. But yeah, I'm very excited. It's like crazy. It doesn't feel real.
What made you decide on San Diego?
I knew I wanted to move out of state for the
Yeah.
last, I would say, like 5-ish years. And with the pandemic happening and just like career stuff and just like life, I don't know, it never made sense. And then the places I had wanted to move, the more I researched, the more I looked into it, it just like then it never felt right, essentially. My sisters had lived in Northern California, so I had a taste of California and I really liked it. But I mean, if you had asked me like 4 years ago and would have said, would you ever want to move to California? I probably would have said no. But I realized it was kind of like just eventually I realized like all the things I wanted out of a new house or a new like home was really landing me in San Diego. So it was the
Oh,
weather, the people, what you get to do, the beaches, the warm weather. So yeah.
and you are so close. You are going to be so close to the ocean. I mean, that is just a dream of mine.
Yeah.
I mean, like a second house, not to move there permanently, but so you are very close. Wow. And so what are you gonna do? Do you think you're gonna go to the ocean every day?
I hope so. Yeah. I mean, that's how I feel about like living here in Michigan by all the lakes. Like I try to get to the
Yeah.
lakes every weekend if I can, or a lake or a body of water, a pool, anything. I love
Right.
water, a water sign. So yeah, I'm
That's
hoping I
true.
can go, hoping I can go to the beach every day. That would be ideal.
Oh my gosh, I know, just perfect. I can just see you just like, starting your mornings with a cup
Yeah.
of coffee.
Oh yeah.
Oh
Not
yeah,
too.
look at my new bling, by the way. Look at this. We have
Mm.
merch.
Oh
Merch,
my gosh,
baby.
I'm in the other room. Yes. Oh
Huh?
my gosh, I forgot
The
about that.
Office
Yes.
Latte podcast.
It
It's
looks so
backwards, I
good.
think, here. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for designing this for me.
Oh yes.
Anyways, well, you're gonna have enough room for a visitor, right?
Oh, most definitely. Yeah. I have an entire room just for you.
Okay, good,
Safe for you.
good, good, good.
It'll be a podcast studio slash your guest bedroom.
Okay, so hey, so speaking of that,
Yeah.
and organizing it, so you're gonna be living in, so you're gonna have your bedroom, and then you'll have the second room that's going to be an office,
Hmm.
uh, a
Podcast
um,
studio.
a podcast studio, but also a spare room.
Yeah, it's gonna be kind of, and that's kind of what we have now. And yeah, decorating it is always interesting. Um, I
But
mean,
just how to
decorating,
make it useful, I think, for
yeah,
all those things, so it feels a little bit separate. Like,
yeah.
you know what I mean? So it feels like you have a dedicated workspace and a dedicated,
Hmm.
or a bed or whatever for your guests, for me. And then, um, I think that will be interesting and always fun, organizing those things.
Oh yeah, no, well, I'm a huge organizer. I love organizing. I could
Me
be
too.
like the home
Yeah,
edit on Netflix, like hire me, but actually don't.
I know. I
I
know.
could.
Me too.
I'd love to work with them for like one day.
Oh my gosh, wouldn't that be
But
amazing?
yeah, I love all the organizing. And then I love, yeah, I mean, I do think like the utilitarianism of the rooms and the space when you have, say, an apartment that is not massive, you have to be very like specific about where you place things. And then you also
Mhm.
just want it to like feel good. And that for me was like our biggest thing with the apartment I'm in now is like I wanted to feel good. I wanted to come home and relax. And I'm here all the time. I work from home. So I needed an
Right.
apartment that felt good. Uh, so that I could be in it all like for most of the time.
Yep.
So big
Yep.
priority there.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm going to be doing my office reno here soon. I mean, we've
Yeah.
kind of gotten started, but it's going to be totally gutted. But So, on that note, our guest today is Laura Cerrano, and she's a Feng Shui master. I don't know if you've heard of that. It's
I've heard of Feng Shui.
like
I feel like I'm like a tiny fan. Like I get maybe tips on TikTok from people.
yeah.
I actually don't know like the extent of things. So,
When we moved into this house, I hated it so much that I was I was looking for I needed something and I found feng shui. Like, I didn't really know it. I knew certain things, like I knew you should have something round in every room and you should have a mirror because it helps open up the space. But anyways, I am really looking forward to talking with her because she's going to get into, you know, um, feng shui with home offices and especially with the pandemic and everybody, well, not everybody's is still remote, unfortunately. A lot had to go back, but just really how to live and work sometimes the same space. So
yeah.
um this is going to be really interesting, and I cannot wait to talk to her. So
Yeah. No, I'm excited too. Obviously, it's perfect time for me because I'm moving. And
right, and me too, because I'm redoing
yeah,
this. So
exactly. It's perfect time for both of us.
I know, me too. Uh, yeah, so let's go ahead and get started. I can't wait to talk to her. So Laura Cerrano is a second generation certified feng shui master who founded the international consulting firm Feng Shui Manhattan in 1997. Laura began her feng shui studies around age 12 under the guidance and mentorship of her mother, certified feng shui master Carol Provenzel. Her practice integrates modern day and classical feng shui applications. She's appeared in publications and media outlets like Oprah Magazine, HGTV Property Brothers. Oh, yeah, we're going to have to talk about that. Property Brothers Forever Home and the New York Times. So we are so excited to have you today.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Yeah, yeah. Can you give us kind of an overview for those who are listening and say, what is that? Or I've heard of the term, but what does it actually mean? Just kind of an overview of what it is.
Yeah, so feng shui, the actual definition is wind and water. So feng is wind and shui is water. But to give a more tangible definition, it's learning how to coexist with the constant changes and transformation of life, from the heavenly influences, the cosmo influences, which that can be true with planetary changes and moon cycles, right? Solar changes. And then in terms of feng shui, deciding how to live your life, what's a healthy lifestyle versus not. And then the other aspect of this practice is timing and decision making, which I already mentioned, but just deciding, is this the best time to move? Is this the best location to set up my office in a house? So feng shui has evolved from the practice of finding the most auspicious burial grounds. And then as life evolved, so did the practice, and that is the definition of feng shui. And now we're saying, how can we utilize feng shui for the living, to best be supported by our home environment, our work environment, and sometimes we have to blend these two worlds together, which is a definite happening during the COVID period. And now we're transitioning out, and it still pops and rears its head from time to time, but we've all adjusted as a world.
Yeah, we have. That's one of the things that, made me think of you in doing this podcast was COVID and how so many people suddenly in an instant, excuse me, had a home office. And so we went from, working in an office in a building to trying to make space in our bedroom and our basement and but let's go back to your mom and how she got started.
So the story of how my mother got introduced to feng shui was, in 1996, we took a family trip to Sedona, Arizona, which is like the main center of life transformations and openings into soul purposes, right? And so long story short, we had a pink Jeep tour guide. Her name was Deborah Rose. And she was I would say, the first that I can remember introducing us, collectively as a family unit, to the concept of intention setting and how powerful your own thoughts and focuses onto yourself and onto others can influence the energy and the energetic outcome. So she did exercises with us regarding learning about intention setting. And then she also introduced us to learning how to read the clouds and how to become more attuned to nature with the subtleties of signs and symbols and things of that, and you know, that conversation, which was really fascinating. And I'm glad that it was taught to my brother and I and my family. It's, you know, especially my brother and I at such a young age, because you could see it still resonates when I tell the story, and it was just so powerful. And basically we went through these different exercises and descriptions, and towards the end of the tour, Deborah pulled my mom aside and she shared with her, when you go back to New York, to Long Island, I strongly encourage that you keep a listen out for the words Feng Shui. And she never heard that before, and neither have we. But she basically said, when you go back, this is a practice that is part of your soul's journey. Like, she was very, very specific. And my mom was extremely open to it, because really the whole Provençal side of the family, I would say, was ahead of their time. Like, they were doing, you know, eating clean, juicing. I remember my Uncle Peter, and he would introduce my brother and I to that. Meditation, you know, paranormal activities. So all this world was already thriving within the family unit. And so she kept an open mind and heart and said, okay, I'm gonna be open to that. And what was really interesting was, at that time, she was actually working at a traditional Chinese medicine school.
Oh,
So I was like, wow,
perfect.
okay,
Yeah.
that alignment, right?
What was she doing there?
She was one of the receptionists. So she was helping students check into the school, helping with
Oh,
the
okay.
right? So it was like a starting page to something new. And I remember she would always come home with like ginseng and clay and all these like herbs and stuff, and like give it to
Yeah.
us and say, oh, this is what it helps you with. And so it made sense, because in the world of Feng Shui, it's a branch from traditional Chinese medicine. They actually, a lot of the acupuncturists, and I've worked with fellow acupuncturists and had clients who are in that practice who say, yes, if you're going to work on your body, it only makes sense that you get your home environment or work environment in ship shape, so the two worlds can collaborate together. So she pursued, when she heard there was the first accredited school certifying people, and it was being recognized by New York State, which was huge. So she went to the school. It was the Metropolitan Institute of Interior Design, and they were offering, yes, interior design, but she took the Feng Shui course, and that was for a full year. And so as
I'm
she
surprised that they had that in the interior design.
yeah, and it to me, especially now, like, most people would say, well, that makes sense that you fuse it with interior design, architecture, construction, like it just goes hand in
Right,
hand.
right.
And that's how it evolved over the years. So for example, in China, they had the Forbidden City built on all feng shui principles. And then if you go into New York City, you have various buildings that have been constructed with feng shui principles. And a project that she and I worked on in Westbury, New York, called the Vienna Hotel and Spa, which has been constructed from top to bottom with feng shui principles and LEED certified. And today it's still the only building in Long Island that can claim that, if you will, which is really cool. That's her legacy that she left behind in terms of structure.
So what did your mom do at the school?
So at the school, she was studying feng shui. Took about a year. And while she was studying, she would simultaneously bring that information back to my home with her and my brother and teach us. So every time we had a situation in our own school, elementary school, junior high, high school, she would offer teachings from the principles of feng shui to give insight through experience and teach us how to problem solve. And so feng shui can go even deeper into just, oh, we're arranging furniture and picking elements and colors. It's a great way of putting it is Feng Shui is a lifestyle. So it's not a religion, it's not a place you go to pray to. If anything, you're turning your home into a sanctuary. But how you define what a sanctuary is depends on your intention, your focus, what it is that you want to cultivate and manifest within your life. So that was the richness. Again, what I remember taking time to reflect of what the deeper teachings and principles of Feng Shui offered to us, and then offering that back to either clients or through segments like this, through storytelling, and saying these principles can carry a healthy lifestyle, habit, choice, behavior. It's not just, oh, let's fix up the environment to make it beautiful. It goes way, way, way beyond that.
Yeah, that's really interesting because, what I knew about it was, kind of rearranging things um, and so you and I had kind of talked about this before that when, we bought our house, it was, an almost 200-year-old money pit. But I knew, it's an old farmhouse, and I knew that it had good bones, and eventually it would it would be something that we loved and really enjoyed. And had a lot of property and outhouse, or not outhouses, but outbuildings and things. Anyways, but I felt like it needed something, and I kind of dove into feng shui. And as we were slowly, because it took us a long time to redo everything. I mean, we had to like replace like a furnace and windows. I mean, we were really down to the bare bones. So as we were going along, little by little, I was kind of incorporating some of what I learned about feng shui, and I was thinking about the grid, which actually you have on your website, feng shui map, right? Of how, in what areas of your house you place different things for, wealth and abundance, fame and reputation, family, all those things. So even once we started having kids, there's certain rooms, placing them in this side of the house or this side of the house, and where I had my office, is all, I just tried to kind of lean towards that. I think because the house was, you know, needed so much love that I was kind of trying to incorporate, as much help as I could possibly have. So, well, in talking about home offices, so this is one of the big things I was thinking of, people having to, I have a friend who is a realtor, and she's working on her dining room table. That's where her stuff is. It's in boxes. And I know other people that are working out of their bedrooms, working out of their kids' playroom, working out of the basement. So how do you create how do you create something that flows well, something that will, you know, just give you the breathing space and the creativity and everything that you need when you're within confined spaces or within your home, or things like that? That's
Yeah,
a big question, but
it's a nice, big, broad question. So
I know.
I would say the first thing is knowing what are the necessities for you while doing work. Like, are you constantly on Zoom calls, phone calls, having that type of meeting, which if you are, then that means you need a quiet space to go to. So just dialing it back to basics. What is the necessities? What are the functions, of my career, profession, what I'm doing? And then I think once you have that established, you can then move on to, okay, what equipment do I need in my room? So we're just going to real basics. Like, can
Yeah.
I use my laptop? Do I need a printer? For example, the room I'm in. So for any Zoom calls like this or podcasts, if you will, I make sure I can retreat to a space in my house that will allow complete privacy, and also have good acoustics. So so once we have that inside this office, I'm just looking, at what I have. I do have a secondary desk. I have my printer, but I also host healing circles in this space. So I purposely keep it minimalistic because when human bodies come in here, and we have a lot, and other instruments for drum circles or chanting or, you know, kirtan, we want to make sure that there's not a lot of visual distraction or visual noise, right? So these are things. So if you're also a person who's like, my brain is constantly going, counter that with the opposite in the environment that you're surrounded by. I even have altars, I have lamps, I have plants, I have different elements that will contribute to a very harmonious, peaceful environment. Now, let's say if you're somebody who's a real estate agent, you might need, I don't know if you guys still use file cabinets, maybe that's too old school.
I have one. I have one. Yeah.
So if you have that, then you say, okay, maybe I need that. Maybe I'm in charge of permits and this or whatever. If you're somebody, I have a client who is a musician where they do mixing. So they don't necessarily need file cabinets, but they need a lot of soundproof equipment, right? And then they have their mixing equipment. I don't know the proper DJ terms. So again, a lot of it goes back to what do you need? What's the function of the room? And then if you're multitasking a room, you have to be able to negotiate the different functions of the room. If we're in the dining room, you can start off and say, maybe I have my laptop and I have other work equipment, but how can I blend it into the console table or store it away when I'm done working and transform it from an office quickly back into a place of eating? Because in the world of Feng Shui, we really don't want to disregard family rooms, especially rooms, whether it's the kitchen or a traditional dining room that says at the end of the day or to start the day, we come together as a family to share meals, to reconnect, to just be together, because that's a huge part and component of work-life balance. So those are some quick, immediate thoughts that come into alignment with just even establishing where am I going on a very practical level, but then you can go deeper into the Feng Shui analysis and say, what direction am I facing that's going to be most beneficial to me?
Right.
What sector of the home? And that then goes into taking compass direction readings, dates of birth, that goes into a whole other world of analysis.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit, because I know when I was when we moved in and I was working from home. I know it was the west side of the house, or the career is, sorry, you're gonna have to refresh. Is career north?
If we're talking about, we'll call modern day Feng Shui, and you're doing compass direction based on that, north would be seen as a career, yeah.
So, okay. So, someone who is, so then so let's just get down to like, detail-y type stuff. Because I know Summer and I were talking about this too, how, she had mentioned she's moving to San Diego. And so in an office, let's say you have like your room and this room, where would be the best location to further your career, or to would it be in the middle of the north side, or like,
Yeah, that gets a bit more complex. And the reason for that is depending on, I'll use the word lineage of Feng Shui that you follow, there are going to be different principles on establishing what is considered a good direction versus not. So I'll try to give you a quick tutorial. So let's say if we're talking about a practice of Feng Shui called 8 mansions. 8 mansions will take the date of birth and the gender of the individual from when they were born. And then you do these calculations and it gives you what's called a qua number. We'll call it an energy number. And based on that particular approach of Feng Shui, they will either say you're an East group person or a West group person. And what that means is, depending on your gender and date of birth, they'll say there are 4 good directions that you can face while working, and there can be 4 unbeneficial directions you kind of want to avoid. But
Yeah.
that's one aspect of it, because then you can go into the world of flying stars feng shui, which goes into the astrology
Oh,
of the house, and that has its own rules. It could depend when did you move into the house. Other lineages of feng shui will say it's not when you moved in, it's when the house was constructed. So even within the community, there's going to be some conflict in how we define the energy charts and how we use them. But in flying star feng shui, what that would do is it would take a compass reading of the home's facing direction, which means what's the most busiest yang energy side, most active side of the house. And you take a compass reading, and it gives you a very specific compass degree. And then you look at another chart, and that will give you information on what sectors of the home are really ideal for wealth generation, for health support, for sleep. Maybe there are certain areas that are not as strong, but these are different elements we can bring in to mitigate it. So it's not as black and white. There's a lot of gray matter. And then we also have to take into consideration the land formation. How is the energy around the home supporting or draining that house? And then on top of that, we have to look at the floor plan layout. How is the flow and fluidity moving through the various levels of the home? There's a lot of minute observations that go on here. And then if somebody does changes to it, to a home, meaning remodeling, that's actually a really ideal time to bring in a feng shui consultant, because we're even very particular on kitchen and stove placement, bathroom placement, bedroom placement. And now, because we have home offices, where to put home offices. So there's a lot of moving parts to what feng shui is, but to try to keep it general yet very helpful.
yeah.
A lot of the stuff that was previously mentioned, that's vitally important, just on the foundation of function and awareness of that and what you really need. And even just bringing in the natural elements. We call this, allowing the outside in. So
Yeah.
one thing is real plants. Real plants are fantastic in a house, in an office.
Yeah, these are some of the tips I was going to ask you for. I know that I had read having something round in every room, or a mirror, and helps create, or like the water feel or something, right?
So in the practice of feng shui, having plants is great, bamboo, rubber tree, stuff like that. But you also want to be mindful of how big is this plant going to get in proportion to the size of your room. So we want to always be practical in that way of thinking. And then you also want to pay attention to the leaf design. So you just mentioned, oh, I heard it's good to have rounded curved design. You're absolutely correct. And science has proven that the human mind enjoys more curved round designs to begin with, because it feels more calm, peaceful, approachable, right? So when choosing plants, it's recommended to choose plants that intentionally have curved or rounded leaves. And if you do have anything that's a bit more prickly or sharp or quite large, just make sure the room can handle it, so it's not impeding onto your space and feel like it's encroaching and oppressive. That would be the subconscious thought process there.
All right, interesting. All right, so also wood, because you were talking about elements. I mean, what are some other things, especially in a home-based office? Can you give us some idea of really the placement of things? I mean, where would you, if possible, especially in a smaller space, like I guess because I have talked to so many people, that's why I was, wanted to kind of nail you down for some specifics. So like, if somebody does have a room, let's say it's also shared with a bedroom, what side, I mean, do you have a recommendation for putting a desk if they have the space for it, let's say like on a certain wall, or I mean, I know you get really in depth, but do you have any, any suggestions for things like that? Putting a desk, or a setup for a podcast, but mainly just for, people who are now working at home, or they do, let's say they do have an office, or or they're working in the basement. I mean, what would you recommend as far as the placement of things?
Yeah, I would say
Cohesive.
the first thought that comes to mind, because you mentioned basement, is in the world of feng shui, if you can avoid basement offices, we definitely recommend that. The exception is if you know that basement has a lot of light.
Right. Or
And
a
then,
walkout. Yeah.
yeah, you could walk out, if you have to escape or something, you have a good amount of light. Otherwise, it's not usually recommended to be in the basement. It would be the same thing with the attic, because you have also, we look at the height of the ceilings. They are, again, kind of pushing or
Yeah.
putting pressure onto you. So what we would say is look for the main level, maybe the second level, where you can do your work. And in terms of, we'll say, general positioning of your desk, because again, we can get lost in all these details.
Think beginner tips.
Beginner tips, but it's good to note that way those who want to get more involved, they can. But beginner simple tips is set your desk up to have what's called a commanding position. So a commanding position can be defined as being able to clearly see your doorway leading from the office into the space, or if you're in a bedroom or living room, wherever you are. So it's saying that you have a sense of refuge. You feel confident, you have better decision making. So those would be the metaphors, but also the literal sensation that people have described.
Yeah.
And so to be fair, I am not in a commanding position because my door is right there, but I purposely position myself this way because we have the best light.
Yeah.
Usually where I would sit is over on this wall. So when I'm turned like this, I can literally see who's coming in and
Yeah.
into work, but I also have a view of outside. So that's a real life example of having a commanding position if you can. And even as you can see the chair I'm sitting in, having a very supportive chair is important. A lot of people will disregard that. This is a chair I invested in, I think maybe about a year ago. I should have done it sooner. But that way, if I have to be here, which I am, writing reports or doing anything like that, I know I'm totally secure. And you'll notice my arms stop here. So even having arms on the chair itself, this is called having an armchair position. So it's translated from the old school days of feng shui into a very modern setup. So anyone who's the president, the CEO, the manager, at least make sure they have a really solid chair, because if they're comfortable and feeling supported, that's going to translate to everybody else. Even if you're working from home and managing a team virtually, it still translates. Let's see.
What about those who are in a bedroom? I do have a friend who is in a bedroom, and her desk is kind of up against the wall, bed's over here. So what I mean, any tips for that?
Yeah, I would say you can still section areas off. If she's able, or anyone is able, to still play with the idea of a strong, sturdy chair and a stationary desk, and even we'll look at materials with the type of desk. So I actually just had a client the other day where they had this beautiful, amazing view of Long Island City in New York. And their thinking was very practical. They said, because I looked at their desk and it was a very small, narrow glass desk. So everything was glass, including their chair. And in the world of feng shui,
Wow.
we're like, you're not going to disrupt the view. And I asked her, I said, do you do work at this desk? And she's like, sometimes my husband and I trade off. And so I said, okay, the metaphor is that when you're doing work and trying to build income, it's almost like income comes, but then it falls through. And one of the things that was translated was, as they're working, they spend more instead of saving. So it can even be translated in a lifestyle choice or decision. So by having a more solid wood desk, or at least a solid top, then it can align with their intention of we're building income, and yes, we spend, but we save more than we spend, right? So that's
Right.
how the translation could come. So
Oh
yeah.
yeah. And I'm a little bit floored that anybody would have a glass desk.
Yeah, it happens. I mean, I would say out of all my years doing this, is like 27 years, I've had a handful of seeing glass desks, and I'm like, please.
Wow. I didn't even know they existed, honestly.
They exist.
Okay,
Yeah.
what about standing desks?
Standing desks are great. Good for
Yeah.
health. You know, you can bring them up and down. Again, they're solid. I think most of those desks are a solid base. Uh,
Mhm.
and if we stick with the idea of the bedroom, because there's a few quick
Yeah,
tips. One thing I wanted to
sure.
definitely point out was area rugs. If you
Oh,
can do that. Now, the reason I bring this up is because a lot of times people will commonly say, how do I separate my work in the bedroom from my sleep zone? And as you can see on here,
yeah.
we have a carpet, right? So just keep it simple so you can use that visual cue to say, okay, this
There's
is
that separation. Oh, I
exactly.
love that. That's a great idea.
Yeah,
Really,
it's
that's a great
super
idea.
simple. And you say when work is done, shut everything down visually on the work side, including the computer. If you can slide it away, put it inside the desk. If it allows it, great, or at least keep it organized. And that way the subconscious mind is not like, oh my God, I have all this stuff going on.
Right,
When
right.
you
And it's
wake
so
up,
busy. It's so busy when you wake up and you see it, you're like, oh,
it's
yeah,
just too much, and it's
yeah.
been proven to create stress. So you don't need that. So if you really can't put it anywhere else, then you have to actively engage in creating healthy boundaries that are tangible, and then through habit.
What do you recommend for people who have a creative job? I know I've read things like, have a bright paint color in the room or whatever, but what do you recommend for creatives or for people who have a more conservative, let's say finance type job? I mean, do you have anything specific for those types?
For creatives, I actually had a lady in Harlem where she lived. I guess they classified as a studio apartment, but it was really interesting because it was a super tall, super tall ceiling, so it didn't feel like that. And this person was I think they call it a seamstress
Oh,
and a painter. And so as soon as you walked in, you saw all these beautiful pieces of artwork, and in fact, the entire building is home to artists, musicians, painters, dancers. It's a very cool place to visit.
hmm
And, and long story short, she asked the same thing. She's like, how do I keep my craft, separated?
right.
And because she's a seamstress, it's a little bit easier because she already has a lot of soft textures. And she actually kept underneath her loft bed all of her seamstress materials, all the needles and the thread,
hmm
whatever, and fabric. And so I said, obviously we can see you love what you're doing, and that's great because that energy will vibe up. So same thing as I just proposed for anyone like in their typical office at home.
Yeah.
I said, when you're done working, just keep it organized. Put everything away, make it a habit, and then take notice if you are sleeping better, right? That our bodies will be our best barometers right now because we don't really have science to measure this. And so I said, just take notice and awareness, be your own experimenter and scientist. And she started doing that, and she's like, I do feel a lot better. I feel like even though it's a very active space, when it's time to tone down the volume of frequency, I can do that. And so it's just
Just
becoming,
keeping it organized and
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. So we
Mhm.
don't have to overthink this, right? You're just becoming more consciously connected to the space and what's going to work for you. So everything we're talking about on this interview, some people will be like, that's not going to work for me. And that's fine. Figure out what works for you, because feng shui is also a form of alchemy. You have to find the right mixture. And that right mixture can change from today to next year because our body and our tolerance for certain things are going to shift and transform.
again, I'm still thinking of like bedrooms and, people using a corner of their kitchen and everything. Is there, you know, anything that, different ways that they I mean, you can't really change your kitchen a lot, but, um, I just keep thinking like, should something be on this wall or should something else be on that wall? Or what about for productivity? I mean, for somebody who needs more of that, do you have any advice for people who feel like they need to be more productive or okay, here's something, or they get that 3 o'clock lull or they don't feel like working anymore. Is there any good tips that you have for something like that?
Um, I would say the first thing that comes to mind is whether you're working in a kitchen, living room, a typical office, a great simple way to inspire yourself is um, just surrounding yourself with visuals or quotes or anything that relates to the nature of your business. So for our company, it mainly started with Feng Shui. So we have, like, I'm looking at a plaque that says, the original business name was Feng Shui Long Island. So that's the company my mother started. And then as I became more confident and able to get out there and do consultations, we established Feng Shui Manhattan and just merge the two worlds together. But essentially we have, I have diplomas, certificates for Reiki, geopathic stress dowsing. Like, I'm just looking around, I have visuals of sacred geometry in the room, but it's not just in the room, it's throughout the entire house. Not everything says feng shui or whatever.
Yeah.
It all encompasses this idea of living a healthy, balanced lifestyle. The artwork, who's given me the artwork I make, right? We have quotes from the Dalai Lama. We have music because I do drum circle facilitation. So all these ideas of inspiration and what I love, not only as a profession, but what I really love to do, is spread throughout the entire house. So I would say don't just focus on everything has to be in one sector.
Right.
That's not how this works. You have to think in a circular mindset, not a linear mindset.
And what about decor? So, people are on Zooms and like especially with me, like say buying something like this or just kind of making it look cute. Do you offer, I mean, what are some tips for feng shui in a Zoom, to keeping that, I mean, your background is calm and nice and you have that guitar there.
Yeah,
But
yeah, this background is very simple. So,
mhm,
but
I
if
like
I
it.
my other way, I'd probably throw a drum in there or maybe something else. But what I would say is if you're constantly doing Zoom, it's
Yes.
the same principle. Who are you? What are you promoting? Your name, a brand, are you an author? And then you can build your background based on that. So
Good.
instead of thinking like, how can I just make it nice? You can also say this is an extension of my reputation. This is an extension of who I am. So a
Okay.
lot of times when people visit our website, fengshuimanhattan.com, people will say, oh, I could just feel there's a certain energy that comes from it. So that means it's doing its job through the visuals, through the colors, through the name, XYZ of what it's translating. And so it becomes a point of attraction. So it's the same thing. So anyone can ask, is the background really expressing who I am? Or maybe I just want to keep a very simple background and allow the focus to be here, right? So there's all these different ways in how you can set that up.
Okay. Another question. You mentioned color. And I know in the grid, they or the map, there's a lot of different color. What does color have to do with feng shui and how do we incorporate that into our offices?
So the colors are going to relate to the different elements in feng shui. And then from there, they can relate to different personality traits. So for example, wood element is going to be plants, and that can symbolize growth and expansion. So reaching to your highest potential, learning. Earth element can relate to feeling grounded and poised. So even during times of stress or uncertainty, a lot of times people will represent earth through the use of crystals or stones, and then they can be very particular on the type of crystals or stones depending on what they represent, what they're using them for. Others will, let's say, okay, the next element will be fire element. So fire element, usually people will translate that to as actual fire.
Like a candle or whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can do a candle, but there's also different temperaments of fire element through the lens of feng shui. So,
Okay.
for example, looking at your lamp, that's a very, what we'll say, very tempered, calm fire element. And every
Okay.
time you turn on that lamp, you can even say, I'm illuminating or turning on reputation, because each of these elements can also relate to a certain, on the Bagua map is what you're referencing.
Right. The Bagua map. Yeah.
Yeah. So the Bagua map can also be called, in modern day terms of feng shui, a life station map. So it gives you a guide. So the grid becomes a guide of what you want to focus on that's really important, what you value. If we look at metal element is anything made of metal. It could be jewelry, it could be instruments that are made of metal, it could be, you know, picture frames, things of that, coins for actual wealth.
Oh, yeah.
You can literally have a wealth vase or coin in your office. Why not? And then we have water element, and water element is really interesting because a lot of times in the general sense of feng shui, people think, oh, just put a water feature anywhere. But again, if you go into the depths of feng shui, there are certain times and cycles for when you want to include a movable object, aka a water feature, versus not. But in general, the water element can help stimulate movement, which is really good when appropriate. So if, for example, in a very general description, if somebody says, oh man, my business is very stagnated or still, you could either do water element or you could do something that replicates the idea of movement on a very general discussion to re-stimulate the energy.
I love that.
Yeah, so that very, very simple. And you also want to pay attention. Let's say if you do get a water feature, you
So
want
you're
to
talking about like a little table water
little
fountain type thing.
table, yeah,
Okay.
water feature, right?
Mhm.
You just want to be really also aware of the direction of water flow. So we like to have water feature energy pull the energy into our space versus push it out. So that's something to keep in mind. If you set up a water feature over here, you don't want the water flowing out the door. You want it coming into the room. So even being aware of that. So it's pulling energy in, which is really important.
So if you just have a little, thing with stones or whatever, and it's just dribbling down, I mean, is that?
Well, it depends. Again, there's so many variables. Are you in a situation where you need strong movement or just a little? So maybe a little dribble is okay, or maybe you need something with a bit more stronger flow.
Oh,
There,
okay.
there's a lot of variations to this.
I do love the sound of water, and I had never thought about actually putting something in my office, but I was like, oh, okay, that sounds interesting.
Mhm.
All right. So water. So what's after that?
Well, let me go back to mirrors because
Oh, yeah.
you mentioned mirrors, and that's actually a really important topic in feng shui.
I've got
So
mine right there. I mean, it's not
yeah,
round, but it's a mirror.
so with mirrors, there's a few principles to keep in mind. The first one is the size and design of the mirror frame, and sometimes the mirror itself. So ideal mirrors, in terms of size, let's start there, would be if you look in the mirror, you can see your shoulders, your head, and about your chest line. So this is called capturing your aura. So that's a good size mirror. If you have something that's very small where it goes to the Vogue position, basically it's saying it's cutting your energy off, which we don't want. So that's the first thing. The next thing is pay attention to the mirror design. So we have the sizes right, but does the design of the mirror also encompass a welcoming look, right? Or is it kind of prickly or sharp?
So
Or
what do you
is
think of that? Welcoming or prickly and sharp?
think it's fine. It works.
Okay.
So
I know.
but if somebody says, well, I want to play it safe, typical mirror formations could be anything of a rectangular shape, a
Right,
oval,
right. Yeah.
be oblong, right? So
Mhm.
you can get creative with it. But we just want to make sure we don't have anything that looks, I'll use the word aggressive, where like it's spiky or kind of off-putting with the design. Or I've had clients in the past where for a while they had fragmented mirrors where they were kind
Oh,
of
yeah.
looking up. That's
Pieces of mirrors. Yeah.
yeah, that's a huge no-no. So those are some really important principles to keep in mind when selecting your mirror. And
I
then
think I'm gonna have to switch that one out because it does have some points. I'm probably gonna have to get like an oblong one or something.
yeah, you can get an oblong, that's fine. And then the other observation to keep in mind is besides the size, will be what is the mirror reflecting? That's really important. So I think you mentioned earlier, oh, maybe a mirror in the bedroom. If you have a mirror in the bedroom, which usually it's not recommended, but if you do, they don't recommend having the mirror face onto the bed right away. And I'll also say that not to face it right away towards your desk, especially if you have a high stress career or profession, because what that does is it doubles that type of energy. There are times you can use the mirror to your advantage, but the general perspective in the community is really try to avoid having that mirror face the bed, face a work zone that's a high stress level, face a bathroom, face the front door. So there's like all these other side discussions, but you want to make sure if a mirror is in a room, it's reflecting something really positive, like health,
Okay.
work, maybe nature, something of that.
Okay, good to know. I'm thinking of all the mirrors in my house. I do have mirrors everywhere, and I'm like, okay, what do they reflect? Yeah, we redid our upstairs in our bedroom last year, and we now have a mirror, giant mirror. I mean, well, because it goes above the dresser, and the dresser kind of faces the bed, so that's a no-no, I guess.
Yeah, and again, like with everything we're talking about, everyone's different. I've known
Yeah,
some people who have mirrors in their bedroom and they're like, we sleep perfectly fine, you
yeah,
know?
I do sleep good. Yeah,
Yeah, so if you sleep good, take what I say with a grain of salt, because we're not about promoting fear. We're just
right.
giving you some insights. And if people who are having unusual situations where they've turned every other rock over to be like, I need an explanation for this, this is honestly Feng Shui consultants get called in because there's no logic to the situations that should have logic. But if
Right,
your life's good and flowing, it's good and flowing.
right,
So,
right, right. All right. And Summer wanted me to ask, what about next to things like mirrors, windows, doors, next to beds? If you can't, again, if it's an office slash bedroom, and if you can't fully make it not facing it, like in in our case, where we just place this massive mirror above the dresser that faces the bed. So, what about, placing it next to things, or I don't know.
that's a great situation. Let's say, okay, you can't do the ideal, keep the mirror out of the bedroom. So then if that's the case, you go back to basics and you say, what can we do as an entire full presentation of that room that will make sure whatever the mirror is seeing, it's still reflecting calm, poise, or whatever it is that you're intending it to do. So if that's the case, if somebody says, hypothetically, I would like to manifest a healthy relationship, or maybe I'm in a relationship, but I want to honor and strengthen that, then the mirror in that case can actually work to your benefit. So a perspective shift. You could say, okay, maybe if I'm in a relationship and we want to strengthen that, besides the practical of communication and XYZ, we can have a couple photos of me and my spouse or whoever I'm dating, if that's the relationship we want to be in, framed in a frame and placed in front of the mirror. And so then the intention becomes we are purposefully doubling that connection with the person.
Oh,
And
I
so
love that. Yeah.
yeah, turns into a positive. And we've even, I remember there was a case, a situation my mother and I worked on, obviously many, many years ago, and it had to deal with fertility. And what we ended up doing was obviously walking through the house and looking at all the different life sections. And it was really interesting because what we noticed in that house is everywhere you walked, there were these tiny little fertility statues, like from Greece, from Rome, little frogs, which frogs in Egypt and in Feng Shui are very fertile creatures. And so they're seen as a fertility. We even saw elephants, which also are extremely fertile. So we're like, this is interesting that we're seeing all this. And then once we got into deeper conversations, we learned that there was some discord between the husband and wife. So when we went into the bedroom, they had a huge mirror facing the bed, and they had all these tiny little fertility frogs set up and like straight into the distance. And so I blurted out, I couldn't help it. I said, "Oh, this is great." I was like, "You can use this to your advantage." Because, you know, we told them the traditional perspective, oh, mirrors aren't good, but we said, why don't you spice it up and use these fertility statues to inspire and watch what you're doing? Why not? And, you know, everyone giggled and laughed, and they said, okay, we'll try it. And so they did other feng shui stuff. They had their conversation to mend whatever was going on individually as a couple. And long story short, I think it was about maybe a year later, they sent a photo of, they named their baby Rose, of baby Rose.
Aw.
We're like, oh, that was so cool. So
Aw, I love that. Good
there are
story.
variations to these principles. It's not always this. The mirror worked for them. For
Yeah.
other people who are always stressed or maybe dealing with illness or sickness, we wouldn't recommend a mirror in the bedroom then.
Yeah, that makes sense though.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, this has been amazing and enlightening, and I'm gonna start working on this office now. No. So how, if somebody wanted to get in touch with you, schedule now, do you do consults like do they need to be in Manhattan or Long Island? I mean,
No, I work with people all over the world.
oh,
So
perfect.
yeah, courtesy of COVID, it opened up a whole other avenue of doing sessions like this. So virtual, in person, combo of the two is very doable.
So then how would somebody get in touch with you if they want to schedule a consult or, read more about you or look at your website or?
The easiest way is just go to the website, fengshuimanhattan.com, and you can learn more about who I am, the company history, the various other healing services provided besides Feng Shui. And honestly, that's the easiest way to get in touch.
Okay. Well, this was amazing. Before we always ask our guests, what's one thing that people don't know about you or wouldn't expect about you that maybe is a passion or something that you love to do?
The easiest response is it once was drumming, but now that's become a profession, which is great. Is I'll say cooking. So
Ooh,
cooking has become a great interest of mine. In fact, I cooked up a nice quick meal yesterday with shrimp and chicken and fresh mashed potatoes and salad.
yum.
Yeah, it was good. So I'm definitely a French cuisine approach fan of cooking.
Oh, nice. So did you read Julia Child's
I
book?
didn't. I would say my uncle Peter, he was a chef who co-owned a place in Providence. I think it's Providence, Rhode Island. And so I have a photo of him in the kitchen. He's long, deceased, but there's a photo of him cooking in that kitchen, just
Aw,
smiling. So I love having
what
that
an
visual.
inspiration.
It
Yeah.
is, and that's an example of it. It could be that simple. What's your intention behind the display? It's not just to display it.
Just infusing that feng shui in your inspiration. Well, I love this. It has been great having you. I think that there's just going to be a sigh of relief for a lot of people who are, in bedroom offices and kitchen offices and I think that there's just been so much value in this conversation. So I really appreciate it. And I hope that we have you on again.
All right. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks again for listening to the Office Latte podcast. You can find us anywhere you listen to your podcast. You can follow the podcast on Instagram and TikTok at Executive Resumes, or subscribe to our YouTube channel, Office Latte Podcast. If you have any career questions or conversations you want us to talk about, send them to officelattepodcast@gmail.com, and we'll answer them in an upcoming show. Have a great week and stay caffeinated.